5 disturbing cases from America's national parks. Imagine this. A park ranger on a routine patrol in Arizona vanishes, leaving behind nothing but whispers of foul play. Years later, a popular radio host is found executed in a Hawaiian park, with no motive or suspect ever found. These aren't scenes from a movie. They're real-life events that unfolded in the serene, beautiful landscapes of America's national parks. Places we go to find peace become the backdrop for some of the most unsettling and enduring mysteries. What happens when the wilderness, a place of beauty, becomes a place of fear? Today, we're exploring 5 disturbing cases from America's national parks that continue to baffle investigators and haunt the public imagination. Millions of people flock to America's national parks every year, searching for adventure, solitude, and a connection with nature. These massive expanses of protected land represent the wild heart of the country. But beneath this tranquility lies a darker side. The same wildness that draws us in can also swallow people whole, and sometimes the biggest dangers aren't the elements. The isolation that defines these parks can make them ideal places for crimes to go unnoticed and for mysteries to take root. From baffling disappearances to unsolved murders, some stories that come out of these parks are as dark and deep as the canyons themselves. We'll start our journey in the sun-scorched landscape of Arizona, where a man tasked with protecting the park simply vanished. Section 1. The Vanished Park Ranger, the case of Paul Fugate. Chiricahua National Monument in Arizona is often called a wonderland of rocks, a stunning landscape of towering stone spires sculpted by ancient volcanoes. It's a remote and rugged place, just 45 miles from the Mexican border, where the desert silence is broken only by the wind. It was here, on Sunday, January 13, 1980, that 41-year-old park ranger Paul Braxton Fugate went to work and never came home. Paul was a monument naturalist, a man with a biology degree who guided visitors through the park's unique ecology. He was known as a bit of a rebel, someone who sometimes clashed with authority but was deeply passionate about the outdoors. On that day, during the park's quiet off-season, Fugate was the only permanent staff member on duty. Around 2 p.m., he told a seasonal clerk he was heading out for a short patrol on a nature trail. He said if he wasn't back by 4:30 p.m., she should close the visitor center without him. He left his radio behind, taking only his keys, and was last seen walking toward the park entrance. 4:30 p.m. came and went. Paul Fugate didn't return. As evening fell, the alarm was raised. What followed was a massive and desperate search of the park's 12,000 acres. Teams on foot and horseback, aided by dogs and helicopters, combed the labyrinthine canyons, but they found nothing. No footprints, no gear, not a single thread from his green National Park Service uniform. It was as if Paul Fugate had been erased from the land he knew so well. From the start, investigators suspected foul play. The park's proximity to the border made it a known corridor for drug and human smuggling, and a strong theory was that Fugate stumbled upon an illegal operation and was silenced. This was supported by some unsettling reports. Park employees claimed to have found vehicle spin-out tracks on a dirt road near Faraway Ranch, an area Fugate patrolled, along with signs of a struggle. Even more chilling was one unverified account from an employee. This person claimed to have seen Fugate around 4 p.m. that day, slumped between 2 men in a pickup truck speeding away from the monument. Under hypnosis, the witness recalled that Fugate looked sad and dejected, describing one of the men as having a Kenny Rogers-type beard. But this lead, like all others, went cold. The case took a bizarre and painful turn. In early 1981, in a move that sparked outrage, the National Park Service administratively separated Paul Fugate from his job for abandoning his position. This meant his wife, Dodie, was denied his death benefits, adding bureaucratic cruelty to her tragedy. The regional chief detective even publicly stated he believed Fugate was alive, living with a paramour somewhere, a claim his wife refuted. It wasn't until 1986, after the case was re-examined, that the NPS reversed its stance, finally allowing his family to receive benefits. Paul Fugate's case remains one of the most prominent and haunting disappearances of an on-duty ranger in National Park Service history. His file is still open. In 2018, citing new information, the NPS and the Cochise County Sheriff's Department tripled the reward for information to $60,000, hoping to finally break the 4-decade silence. Did he run into smugglers? Was it a random act of violence? Or did something else entirely happen in that wonderland of rocks? The desert keeps its secrets, and the mystery of the vanished ranger endures. From the arid deserts of Arizona, we now travel across the Pacific to the lush, volcanic landscapes of Hawaii. Here, in a park known for creation and destruction, a life was violently taken, leaving behind only the chilling echo of a single, unexplained act of violence. Section 2. The Murdered Radio Host. The Case of Armin B. Johnson. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is a place of primal power and breathtaking beauty, a landscape constantly being reshaped by nature. But in April 2005, this paradise became a crime scene. On April 13, 2005, a passerby made a grim discovery near the park's southern boundary. About 100 yards off the Mamalahoa Highway, lying in the brush, was the body of a man. He was identified as 44-year-old Armin B. Johnson, a beloved local figure. An autopsy showed he had been killed by a single gunshot to his upper back and neck. Investigators determined he was killed right where he was found. No effort had been made to move or hide his body. His friends would later call it an execution. The murder of Armin Johnson rocked the tight-knit community of the Big Island. He was the last person you'd expect to be a victim of violence. Originally from Seattle, Johnson had woven himself into the fabric of the island since moving there in 1984. He was a massage therapist, a therapeutic aid for children with autism, and a volunteer athletic trainer. But he was best known as the host of a popular weekend reggae show on a local radio station, KWXX. Friends described him as having a magic personality and a generous spirit. By all accounts, he was a trusting and harmless man. So who would want to execute him? That's the question the FBI and the National Park Service have been asking ever since. The investigation hit a brick wall almost immediately. There was no clear motive. Johnson's old, beat-up car was missing and has never been recovered. Investigators explored every possibility. Some friends acknowledged he used drugs recreationally and wondered if that was connected, but even they felt it didn't explain the murder of a man so widely loved. The execution-style nature of the killing suggested a targeted act, not a random robbery. Yet, no one in his life seemed to have a reason to want him dead. He had no known enemies, no disputes, no secret life that could explain his violent end. The case went cold. 10 years after the murder, in 2015, the FBI announced a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to an arrest. They hoped that with time, a witness might feel emboldened to come forward. As FBI Special Agent in Charge, Paul Delacourt, stated, "We are hoping that the passage of time may embolden a witness to come forward and tell us the truth about how and why this tragic act of violence occurred." But so far, time has offered no truth. The reward is unclaimed, and no suspects have ever been publicly named. The case remains an active but unsolved homicide on the National Park Service's cold case list. Armin Johnson, a man who brought joy and healing to his community, was left to die alone in one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The question of who pulled the trigger and why remains a dark stain on the idyllic landscape of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Our next case takes us to the mainland, to the towering peaks and ancient glaciers of Washington state. Here, another park employee's life came to a mysterious and tragic end, leaving behind a puzzle of scattered remains and the lingering question of whether she fell victim to the wilderness or something far more sinister. Section 3. The Scattered Remains. The Case of Sheila Carnes. Mount Rainier is an icon of the Pacific Northwest, a majestic volcano looming over the landscape. For 43-year-old Sheila Carnes, working there was a dream come true. In the fall of 1996, she had just been hired onto the winter crew at the park and was incredibly excited. She would never start that job. Sheila was a seasonal employee working at the historic Paradise Inn. Friends remember her as a kind and spiritual person, soft-spoken but with a glow about her. Some noted she seemed careful, almost on edge, as if she were trying to start fresh from a past she didn't discuss. She had recently gone through a divorce after putting her husband through medical school, and the job at Mount Rainier was her new chapter. On the evening of Friday, October 4th, 1996, Sheila was last seen having dinner in the employee lounge. The next day, she didn't show up for her shift. Right away, this was a red flag. When her supervisor checked her room, they found her bed neatly made and her belongings untouched. Her car was still parked outside. It was as if she had just vanished. At first, everyone assumed Sheila, a hiker, had gotten lost on a trail. Search parties were dispatched, but they found no sign of her at all. As days turned into weeks, the fear grew that this wasn't a case of a lost hiker. The FBI became involved, as the disappearance occurred on federal land, and by late October, they publicly stated their fear that she might have been abducted, offering a $5,000 reward. The long, snowy winter buried the park and any potential clues. It wasn't until the following May, as the snow melted, that hikers made a gruesome discovery about a mile from where Sheila worked. It was human skeletal remains. More were found over the next several days, scattered across a 300-yard area. Dental records confirmed the unthinkable. The remains belonged to Sheila Carnes. The discovery answered where Sheila was, but deepened the mystery of what happened. The condition and scattering of her remains made it impossible to determine a clear cause of death. Investigators considered two main theories. First, that she had been attacked by a mountain lion. The second, more sinister theory was that she was abducted and murdered. Did she leave her room willingly that night? Or was she taken? Her undisturbed room offered conflicting signals. Friends recalled her excitement about her new job, making it seem unlikely she'd leave on her own. But who would have harmed her? The investigation, a joint effort which included the FBI, interviewed numerous people, but no one was ever named as a person of interest. For over 25 years, the case has remained cold. The beauty of Mount Rainier is now, for those who knew Sheila, haunted by her unsolved death. Was she a victim of a wild animal? Or was there a human predator lurking in the park that fall? Someone who saw an opportunity and left behind a mystery that the melting snows only partially revealed? The truth of what happened to Sheila Carnes may be lost to the mountain forever. The mysteries we've explored so far are relatively modern. But our next case takes us back to the Roaring '20s, deep into the heart of one of America's most awe-inspiring natural wonders. It's a story of love, ambition, and a disappearance so famous it has become part of the very lore of the Grand Canyon. Section 4. The Honeymoon Ghost. The Case of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. In the fall of 1928, the Grand Canyon was still a raw, untamed frontier. For adventurers, its wild Colorado River was the ultimate challenge. This is what drew newlyweds Glenn and Bessie Hyde to its edge. Glenn, a 30-year-old farmer, was a seasoned river runner. Bessie, a 23-year-old artist and poet, was a novice. Together, they sought not just adventure, but fame. Their goal was to set a new speed record for navigating the river, and Bessie would make history as the first woman to run the entire length of the Grand Canyon. They set off on October 20th, 1928, in a 20-foot wooden scow Glenn had built himself. Tellingly, Glenn refused to bring any life jackets. For weeks, they battled the rapids. On November 16th, They hiked out to restock supplies and met Emery Kolb, a famous photographer who operated a studio on the South Rim. This encounter gives us one of the last, most haunting glimpses of the couple. Kolb later said Bessie seemed weary. He claimed she told him she was sick of the river and that Glenn had become pushy and mean. Kolb offered them a room to rest, but Glenn stubbornly refused. Before they left, Kolb took what would become the last known photo of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. They were last seen pushing off into the river on November 18th. When the Hydes didn't arrive in Needles, Arizona, by early December, Glenn's father grew anxious and launched a search. On Christmas Day, a search party found Glenn's scow. It was perfectly intact, floating upright. All their supplies were still inside: food, clothing, even Bessie's camera and her diary. But of Glenn and Bessie, there was no sign. The logical explanation is a tragic accident. Investigators believe they likely capsized in a violent stretch of water past Diamond Creek. Without life jackets in the frigid water, their chances would have been slim. But the pristine state of the boat has fueled nearly a century of speculation. The story became a staple of Grand Canyon lore, featured in books and on television shows like Unsolved Mysteries. Did the tension Emery Kolb saw escalate? One theory suggests Bessie murdered an abusive Glenn and hiked out to start a new life. This idea got a bizarre boost in 1971, when an elderly woman on a rafting trip claimed to be Bessie Hyde before later admitting she lied. Another rumor swirled around the famed female river runner Georgie Clark. After her death, a copy of the Hyde's marriage license was found among her things, but historians have widely discredited the idea that she was Bessie Hyde. Even Emery Kolb fell under suspicion when skeletal remains with a bullet in the skull were found on his property, but they were proven to belong to someone else. The story of Glenn and Bessie Hyde is a chilling reminder of the river's power. But it's the human element, the ambition, the alleged conflict, the sheer mystery, that has made it an enduring American ghost story, their names now linked not to a record, but to one of the most famous unsolved disappearances in national park history. From a mystery born of adult ambition, we turn to our final case, one that is perhaps the most heartbreaking of all. It's a story that strikes at a universal fear: the disappearance of a child. In the vast wilderness of the Great Smoky Mountains, a simple game of hide-and-seek became the prologue to an agonizing mystery that has lasted for more than 50 years. Section 5. The Lost Boy, the Case of Dennis Martin. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the most visited national park in the United States, a sprawling expanse of ancient mountains and dense forests. For the Martin family, a camping trip there was a cherished Father's Day weekend tradition. The trip they took in June of 1969 would shatter that tradition and their family forever. On Saturday, June 14, 1969, the Martin family was hiking near Spence Field, a scenic meadow along the Appalachian Trail. Late that afternoon, 9-year-old Douglas and 6-year-old Dennis Martin began playing hide-and-seek with other children. The adults watched as the kids hatched a plan to sneak up and surprise them. Dennis, wearing a bright red t-shirt, was last seen by his father disappearing behind a rhododendron bush to hide. A few moments later, the other boys jumped out, laughing. But Dennis wasn't with them. Only minutes had passed. His father, William, began calling his name. The fun dissolved into concern, and then sheer panic. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Dennis's grandfather hiked a grueling 9 miles to a ranger station for help. What followed was one of the largest search operations in National Park Service history. At its peak, more than 1,400 people descended on the area, including the National Guard and even Green Berets. But just hours after Dennis vanished, a severe thunderstorm dumped 3 inches of rain, washing away any potential tracks or clues. Despite the massive effort, searchers found almost nothing. Some small, bare footprints were discovered near a stream, but they were never definitively linked to Dennis. After weeks of relentless searching, the official operation was called off. Not a single verifiable trace of Dennis Martin was ever found. In the absence of evidence, theories have swirled. The simplest is that Dennis got lost and succumbed to the elements or a wild animal. But a far more disturbing possibility has come to define the case. On the same afternoon, a family hiking about 7 miles away reported hearing an enormous, sickening scream. Shortly after, they saw a rough, unkempt-looking man moving quickly through the woods, carrying something over his shoulder. The FBI largely dismissed the sighting because of the distance involved. For Dennis's father, however, abduction became the only explanation that made sense. How could a child vanish so completely from an open area surrounded by family in a matter of minutes, leaving nothing behind? The idea that someone was waiting in the woods has made the Dennis Martin case a cornerstone for those who believe something sinister lurks in our wild places. The case changed how missing person searches are conducted in national parks, but that provides little comfort. Dennis Martin walked behind a bush and stepped into an enduring American mystery, leaving behind only grief and a half-century of unanswered questions. From a vanished ranger to a lost child, these 5 cases are profound and unsettling mysteries hidden within America's national parks. These are places of immense beauty, but they are also wild, and they hold their secrets close. The stories of Paul Fugate, Armin Johnson, Sheila Carnes, Glenn and Bessie Hyde, and Dennis Martin are more than just cold cases. They are haunting reminders of the thin line between civilization and the untamed world. They speak to our deepest fears, of the unknown, of the wilderness, and of the darkness that can sometimes be found in the most beautiful of places. Are these isolated tragedies? Or is there something more sinister lurking in the shadows of our nation's most treasured landscapes? The official files may be cold, but the discussions are very much alive. What are your theories on these cases? Do you think Paul Fugate stumbled upon a crime? Who could have murdered Armin Johnson? Was Sheila Carnes a victim of a person or of nature? And what do you think really happened to the Hydes on the river and to little Dennis Martin in the woods? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you find these unsolved mysteries as compelling as we do, be sure to like this video and subscribe for our next investigation into the unknown.